Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining tonight is my new friend, Patrick O'Donnell. I think we're going to talk a little music. We're going to talk about a little writing. We're going to talk a little bit of TV consulting. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk about music. That's one of my big loves.
So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, let's see. I was born on the south side of Chicago in Illinois, right across the street from, if you're a Blues Brothers fan, where they were in a park and there was a
Okay.
bunch of Nazis on that bridge and they're like,
Yeah.
I hate Illinois. I was born right across the street from there. Holy Cross Hospital, right across from Marquette Park. So both my parents are Irish immigrants. So, I grew up a little bit differently, probably. Yeah, we were on the south side of Chicago, and then later on, we moved to Niles, which is a northwest suburb of Chicago. When I was a freshman in high school, we moved to Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. My dad got a job transfer.
Hmm.
So I went from the Chicagoland area to a town of less than 10,000 people.
Yeah. What grade were you in with that change?
I was a freshman in high school.
Oh, you started a freshman in a new school?
Yeah, I was about a quarter way through my freshman year in Chicago. And then my dad got the job transfer, so it was kind of a late addition
Mm.
into the high school in Fort Atkinson. And wow, was that culture shock. Holy cow.
Reason I ask is my dad was in the army and we moved a lot,
Okay,
partly because he was in the army and partly because my mom was a big old mommy and daddy's girl. And so anytime she could, she would move back to Louisiana to be near to her parents.
sure.
And so I counted once, kindergarten through eighth grade, I went to 12 different schools.
Oh,
When I was a freshman, he had retired from the army. Were in the process of getting a divorce. And so we moved into a little suburb of Lake Charles, Louisiana. And so I did get to spend all 4 years in high school with the same class, right?
that's good. That's
But
good.
it was weird that you would hear people talking about, oh, remember we were in the third grade? And I was like, I can't remember what school I went to in the third grade. So I take it both of them, did they immigrate early? Did they immigrate late? When did they immigrate? When did they
My
come to the
mom
country?
my mom was 12. She came over with her parents, and my dad was 19.
Wow.
It's kind of cool because Ireland was a third world country back then. And my dad actually flew over, which was a huge deal. It made like the local newspaper that Jimmy O'Donnell flew to America. He still has the newspaper clipping. It's super cool to see. He was going after my mom. They kind of reconnected. They were both born in the same village.
Hmm.
I mean, no electricity, no plumbing, midwives, just a bunch of little farms. Not the
Hmm.
farms that are like here, like the ginormous
Yeah.
ones. These are just little ones.
Hmm.
But all the families knew each other. And my mom, when she graduated from high school, her and her family went back to Ireland for a month on vacation, and then she reconnected with my dad.
Hmm.
They're having like this big dinner in the house where my mom was born, and they're both like 18, 19 years old. And the old ladies that were at the table was like, "Ah, Jimmy, give Anna a kiss. Come on, give her a kiss." Yeah, just they're egging them on. It's like they were instant matchmaking. It's like, oh, they'd be a cute couple. So sure enough, mom was telling dad about how great America is. Is like, well, I'm humping my ass here, working in a slaughterhouse and doing the family farm thing. So America sounds great. So that's how we wound up in Chicago.
That is so. What kind of music were they listening to when you were growing up? What was on was there a lot of music in the house?
Yes, it was kind of a mixed
Mm.
bag. I was tortured with the Lawrence Welk show every week. We had to watch
Okay.
that. That was brutal. But and hee haw. And I'm like, oh God, this is so bad. But I did notice how amazing Roy Clark was as far as a guitar player. That guy was, there was some really good musicianship. Obviously, there was a lot of corny. That was their shtick. I didn't like that humor as a kid. I still don't like that humor. I thought it was dumb. But my mom was a huge Elvis fan. So we heard a lot of Elvis in the house, Johnny Cash, Chubby Checker, and I was a kid, but I'm just like, wow, I really like Johnny Cash. I could tell it's like, oh, this is some good music. So it wasn't too terrible as far as what
Mhm.
parents would force your kids to listen to. We had a turntable and just a really old phonograph. We didn't even have like a stereo till much later on.
You know, you just used one of my lines, Pat. My audience can kind of go into two general buckets. The first one is they liked their parents' music, and then as they got older, they expanded their musical horizons
Sure.
and developed their own love. Others could not stand their parents' music, rejected it outright, and then when they turned 30, they'd go, "You know that Johnny Cash guy Dad liked? He's pretty good."
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think we're ever going to say, "Yeah, that Lawrence Welk team, that was pretty good." I
No,
mean,
that was
yeah,
brutal. That
yeah,
was
that
that
was
was
brutal.
penance.
I grew up speaking of Blues Brothers, and we did not have on the bingo card Blues Brother being brought up twice. But as the Brew Brothers said, I grew up listening to both kinds of music, country and Western.
Yeah.
And so we did watch Johnny Cash. We did
Yep.
watch Hee Haw. And yes, the jokes were corny and the girls were pretty. There were amazing musicians that, if you love country music, which my parents did, it was amazing to see the amount of people they had.
Yes, like I said before, Roy Clark, he's like a virtuoso when it comes to guitar.
Oh, yeah,
It was just, even like the banjo or whatever, and
yeah,
they'd have guests on it. It was
yeah,
almost jaw dropping. I'm like, holy cow! That's because I
yeah,
remember taking guitar lessons as a kid.
yeah.
Then, I'd watch Roy Clark just shred it, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm nothing compared to this dude.
Yeah, and we also did not know at the time how good Buck Owens was.
Yeah, you're
Like
right.
when you look at his songs and everything, that whole Bakersfield sound that later, Dwight Yoakam embraced. So when did you start finding your own musical path? And talk to me a little bit about who you were enjoying to listen to.
Well, when I was in grade school, I started playing the saxophone. I was in band. I was a band kid. I absolutely loved it. I was doing pretty good actually. I played alto and baritone sax, so I'd
Okay.
carry both of them around with me. I'd lug this ginormous baritone sax around with me. And the band director loved jazz, so
Okay.
we weren't just playing like really boring music. We were actually like playing Take the A Train or
Hmm.
Watermelon Man or, a lot of just, String of Pearls. And I just fell in love with that kind of music. I thought, man, this big band stuff is awesome. It's weird for like a kid to be thinking that, but I was. When I was a freshman, I went to Notre Dame High School for boys. It was
Okay.
in Niles
Sure.
outside of Chicago, and you had to try out for band.
Yeah.
And I tried out, and they're like, "We're going to put you in the jazz band," which was unheard of for a freshman. They cut an album every year. They go touring like around the country, and I'm just like, "Oh my God, I just died and went to heaven. This is this is a dream come true." And then I got transferred, and the band that was in Fort Atkinson wasn't even a quarter of what it was, at Notre
Yeah.
Dame. It just, I mean, they tried, but it just the quality wasn't even not even kind of a smidge close. But in high school, there was a jazz band, so I started playing with that jazz band in high school, and I really, really enjoyed the music thing. And at that time, I have an older brother,
Yeah.
and he was a huge music lover, and he wound up being a DJ at the campus radio station. He went to UW Whitewater, which was like 10 miles away from where we lived, and
Right.
he would be bringing home albums. There were cuts that they couldn't play anymore, and we talked my dad into getting a Zenith Allegro stereo with two speakers and turntable, and we didn't go the 8-track route. We went the cassette route. We thought that was
Sure.
pretty cool. all of a sudden I'm hearing all these other musicians, and I'm just like, some of them I loved and some of them I couldn't stand. My brother was a huge Dylan fan and Joan Baez, and I'm just like, okay, in small doses, yes, but
Okay.
not all the time. I can only hear so much. It's just so,
Right.
but that did expand my musical horizons, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I remember one time he came home and he started laughing. I'm like, what are you laughing about? And he's like, in speech class today, some girl gave her speech about how Bruce Springsteen is the best singer, performer that has ever lived. That was her whole speech. And I'm like, I kind of know who he is. So he brought home, it was probably Darkness,
Okay.
something like that. And I was just like, holy shit, this is amazing. And I'm like, wow. And at the same time, I was digging the Rolling Stones. I liked punk music. I always had an affinity for punk music. I remember, Never Mind the Bollocks, the Sex Pistols. I thought that
Sure.
was like the coolest album ever. I love the rawness of it. I graduated from high school and went to college, and I started out as a music major. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I started with that. I worked two full-time jobs and saved money, lived at
Yeah.
home, and I was able to pay for my own college.
Oh,
I,
nice.
I had a good job, and I worked full-time. I worked full-time through college, unfortunately. I don't suggest that for you kids out there listening. Please don't do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with working, but working full-time while you're going to school full-time, that's just brutal. It's
So oversharing, you were better than I was. I was working 40 hours a week, going to school, and after 2 years, I said, well, I should just quit school. I mean, I'm
mm,
working 40 hours. I just can't do this. And I never went back. And I
okay.
really regretted that. And yes, I wish that I had been able to figure out a way to, work part-time. I absolutely, but to, do that. And so, yeah, good for you. That is hard to do. It is
Yeah,
hard
and
to take 12, 15 hours a semester, 40 hours
yeah.
of work, try to keep your grades up, you know.
Well, I got kicked out twice.
Okay.
Full disclosure, it's like it was the 80s, Jesse, and we had a
Yeah.
lot of fun. I mean,
Yes.
I graduated in 88.
Okay.
And like I said, I got kicked out twice, but I did graduate. And I couldn't have done it if I was living on campus the entire time. I only lived on campus my last 2 years.
Hmm.
So, and then I started going into all the music classes, like music theory, class piano, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, they were like 1 or 2 credit classes that you're taking like 4 or 5 days a week.
Hmm.
And I'm literally loading crates out on the dock, as the boss would say. And
Hmm.
I'm wearing my work clothes or whatever. And these kids are wearing like all black and they're all goth and whatever. It just didn't
Yeah.
mix, man. I just got done working, or I had to go to work right after class.
Yeah.
And it didn't work that great. So I liked sociology and criminal justice, so I thought, you know what? There was also a part of me that thought, I could see myself doing police work. So
Hmm.
that's what I gravitated towards.
Why do you think that called to you?
I think first off, just being a young kid in a big city, you saw the police cars zooming all over the place with the flashing blue lights.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. And then of course TV shows like SWAT and Starsky and Hutch. That was my era.
Sure.
There's plenty of stuff like that, or Chips is corny or whatever. I thought it was really cool.
Hmm.
Just hey, you can drive a squad car really fast and just do all
Yeah.
kinds of cool stuff. I was like, all right, sign me up. So I strayed away from the music thing. And like I said before, my brother was a DJ on the campus radio station, but I would fill in for him every now and then. He'd have a party to go to or whatever. Hey, could you fill in? I got like 1 hour left or 2 hours left. And I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to be there at all. And
Right.
I'm like, sure, why not? Hopefully the professor isn't listening. Yeah,
Yeah.
give me those albums, give me those turntables. Let's go.
Did you become a fan?
Oh yeah,
Tell me that story.
she loved Clarence Clements. She loved the saxophone, and I played sax, so I
Yeah.
totally I was blown away literally by how good he was. He played tenor sax mostly, but he played baritone as well. And the musicality of the E Street Band was something that really, really drew me because they were so damn good.
Yeah.
I loved the rawness. It was rock and roll in the
Sure.
early days. It was rock and roll. There was no 10-piece horn section, there was no symphony.
Yeah.
It was like a garage band on steroids. Bruce was the kind of guy that I wish I could have seen when he was playing a little club or doing a battle of the bands in some grocery store parking lot
Yeah.
with just the basic E Street Band. I would have loved to have seen that.
One of the things that struck me when I bought the No Nukes concert film that they
Mhm.
made was how small the band looked. Because there's no Niels, there's no Susie, there's no Patty, there's just that core band. Because, like, for the River Tour, he didn't have the chorus, he didn't have the E Street Orchestra, and it still was like 10 people on stage.
Yeah, but what really caught my attention was, and I'm a huge Tom Petty fan as well. I saw Tom Petty like 4 months before he died. He was in Milwaukee.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I mean, I'm so happy that I was able to see him one last time.
Yeah.
But, he wasn't himself. I guess he had a hairline fracture in his hip.
Mm,
And
okay.
the doctor is saying, hey, you need to, like stop touring. And he's like, I'll stop touring when the tour is over. And that's why he was self-medicating because he
Yeah.
was in so much pain,
Yeah.
and unfortunately it caused his demise. But it wasn't the normal Petty concert that I was used to.
Yeah.
I've seen Petty like more than 10 times, and I've seen Bruce
Okay.
probably close to that. And I was like, I wasn't disappointed. It was still a great concert, but you could tell there was just something off, about it
Hmm.
because the poor guy was in a lot of pain and he was probably stoned to the gills trying to mask it.
Yeah.
So, it just horrible. But the reason why I bring up Tom Petty is Petty and Bruce both kind of, it was just that really raw rock and roll,
Sure.
but they had a Hammond organ. They
Yeah.
included keyboards, and Bruce included a saxophone. And it's like, and it was perfect. That blend. I don't know who woke up one morning and said, hey, why don't we do this? And it worked like Lucky Charms.
Yeah. It did. Did you see any of the tour last year or this year?
No, I did not. Probably 2008. It was
Okay.
St. Patrick's Day in Milwaukee. I
Okay.
took a friend of mine that had never been to a Bruce concert, and I'm just like, oh, dude, you gotta go.
Yeah.
So I went, I enjoyed it, but it was almost too much.
Okay.
There's a point, and I understand there's a lot of musicians out there that are still touring because you got to tour to make money. You have to tour to be
Yeah.
relevant. It's not the old days of album sales anymore. The
Right. Yeah.
musicians are kind of screwed that way. If you want to
Yeah.
make money and connect with your fans, there is no other way of doing it. I remember the first time I saw him was the Born in the USA tour at Alpine Valley
Okay.
in East Troy, Wisconsin, and it was 2 or 3 nights, and I could only afford one ticket. And the next 2 nights, we just hung out in the parking lot
Right.
and just listened, from the parking lot. And I'm just like, man, this is so damn good.
That's very cool. So, how long were you a police officer? And talk to a little bit about your law enforcement career.
Well, my degree was in sociology. I had a minor in criminal justice because they didn't offer a criminal justice major where I went to school.
Yeah.
So back in 95 is when I got hired. I was on the waiting list for 4 years.
Wow.
So I took the test when I was 26 for there. I tried a shotgun approach. I tried all different municipalities.
Hmm.
And back then, the competition was fierce. I think there was like 3,500 people took the written test for like 400 jobs when I
Wow.
applied. And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it or not. If I'm
Sure.
not a good test taker, I'm dyslexic as hell. I'm not a good test taker. I'm not a very good reader. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not my thing. And luckily, I did good enough to get on. And before that, I was working in restaurants. I was a restaurant manager. I sold cars. I bartended. I did whatever I could to pay the bills. So until I got on the job in Milwaukee. So I got on in Milwaukee and I worked there for 25 years. I retired in 2020. And it wasn't because it was 2020. It's just I had my 25 in, then I could retire with a full pension. And I knew that from day one. I'm like, I'm not spending a second more than I have to. And it wasn't because I hated the job. I absolutely loved the job. I mean, yeah, there were down times, and we're all a bunch of broken toys now that come out of it. No one comes unscathed. If you work the street for 25 years, nobody gets out of that, hole. Let's just say that.
Yeah, the cliche, right, is you understand why there is substance abuse and self-medication,
Oh, absolutely.
right? Yeah. And there is so much, there is just a lot of pressure. So you decided, right? Like, once I can get my full pension, I'm going to go on. Did you get a second career? Or tell me a little about that.
Well, I'm a big fan of digging the well before you're thirsty. I
Okay.
forget where I heard that. After you have
Oh,
20 years on, I had the luxury of knowing that in, okay, 5 years, I'm popping smoke. I'm getting out of here.
yeah,
The downside of that is, okay, now what? I had a
yeah,
very long list of stuff that I didn't want to do.
yeah.
And, of course, being a cop, I got divorced after being married for 23 years. I married the girl that I went to college with,
Okay.
college sweetheart. And, the divorce rates for cops is sky high. So,
Yeah,
they give you a gun, a badge, and, some attorney names. They give you some
yeah.
cards with your divorce attorney. Here you go. You're going to need this later, kid. So financially, you got to do something.
Yeah.
And I did not want to be that guy just sitting on my ass, watching TV every day and die 2 years later. Statistically, cops don't last very long after retirement. They've done all kinds of studies on it where, especially if you've been on the street for 25 years and you were an active officer. I was a sergeant, I was in charge of the cops on the street.
Okay.
And it's a lot of adrenaline. And if you're on the street the entire time, you don't understand all of that until you stop doing it. It's
Right.
kind of like you're driving a Ferrari at 100 miles an hour down the Autobahn, and then now
Yeah.
it's time to stop. Here's your Yugo. Yeah, that
Sure.
tops out at 20 miles an hour. Yeah, it's like that's a tough transition. So I thought one of my best therapies was working out. I'm a gym rat. I love going to the gym. I love lifting weights. I like doing cardio. It clears my head. And that's like a basic thing. I've been doing that forever. And then what happened was, it's like, okay, I'm going to be retiring pretty soon. So I started thinking about what am I going to do? And like I told you before, I used to sell cars. And a friend of mine said, you know what? You should write a book about that, to help people buy cars. So it was more or less a glorified PDF. This
Okay.
is like 2009, 2010, something like that. And a good friend of mine who was also a cop said, "Hey, I've got this friend, that she's, a published author. She's got an agent in New York. Do you want me to give the manuscript to her?" I'm like, "Yes, please." So she called me and she's like, "I absolutely love it. I could see there's a market for this. I'm going to pitch it for you. I'm going to New York next week." I'm like, "Oh, geez,
Wow. Okay.
it's really that
Nice.
simple?"
Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I get a phone call the next day from my friend, and he says, "Hey, I had a big argument with her last night over politics." And I'm just like, "No."
No,
And I'm like,
no.
so I called her as soon as I got off the phone with him, and I'm just like, "Hey, I hope this doesn't affect our relationship." And she's like, "I already threw that in the garbage." She said, "Your manuscript's in my garbage. I never want to talk to you again. F you, blah, blah, blah. Peace out. See ya." And I'm like,
Wow.
oh. I went from thinking I literally went to International Autos and I'm looking at all the cool Porsches and all these cool
Yeah.
cars. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna be rolling in dough. And then, yeah, okay, this Camry still looks pretty good. Yeah, okay, I'll just go with that.
So the question I would have, right, is did she really think the manuscript was good, or was she just trying to say something nice for her boyfriend?
They weren't romantically involved. They were just
Okay, they're just
friends.
friends. Okay.
Yeah, they were just friends.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was just a courtesy or she was just being nice,
Yeah.
but I'll never know. So I started listening to podcasts. There's this new fandangled thing called podcasts.
Yeah.
And there was a self-publishing podcast. And I'm like, you can publish your own? You can put it up on Amazon yourself. And I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. I thought you had to have an agent. I thought you had to have a
Yeah.
publisher, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try. So a friend of mine edited for me a super corny cover, and I put it under a pen name because any kind of outside employment, well, pretty much anything you do has to be approved by the chief of police, even a
Right.
big organization. And I'm like, they're not going to understand this, and it's
Yeah.
going to take forever. So I just did it on the down low. I had no big aspirations of anything. I'm just like, I'm just
Yeah.
going to keep doing this. So I published the book. It didn't do great, but it didn't do terrible. And like, even just one person buying it that's not your mom or something like that, a
Yes.
total
Right.
stranger,
Yeah.
you're like, holy shit, somebody actually bought my stuff and then left a review. And you're like, okay. So I started going to writers' conferences. And long story short, the magic at writers' conferences happens at the bar, the mixer, the cocktail hour, etc. You start networking. And people were coming up to me and they're like, hey, you're that cop guy, right? And I'm like, how do you know that? Everybody always knows you're a cop, always. So,
Okay.
and they were being super cool. They're like, hey, I'm writing this story. Would my guy need a warrant for this? Hey, does this sound realistic? What about this gun? These are a bunch of writers that don't know anything about police stuff, but write police books. And I'm like, okay. And I'm helping them and helping them. And like I said before, you start to make friends, and I wrote a couple of other books that had nothing to do with police work. And somebody that knew a lot more about this stuff than I do took me off to the side and was like, dude, you need to write some books for writers that, it's like just getting their police facts straight. So I wrote two books called Cops and Writers, and it's more or less technical manuals for writers. It's like, okay, the first book is from the academy to the street. What is the training? What is the equipment? What actually happens in a squad car, et cetera. Then the other one was crime scenes and investigations. Okay, somebody's dead. What do we do? What are the steps,
Yeah.
et cetera. And this is for people writing crime novels. And lo and behold, it sold really well. Both those books sold really well. And I did all this myself. So this was right as I was retiring. And
Hmm.
I knew it's like, okay, I want to do this. And I started promoting myself on podcasts,
All right.
for the books. And I started a Facebook group. And it was all cops and writers. And I thought to myself, I'm not uncomfortable behind the mic. I've done the
Sure.
DJ thing. My brother was also like a bar DJ, mobile DJ, and I'd help him out with that, and I'd do some of his gigs for him. And podcasting I thought was outstanding because it's kind of like it's your radio show, but
Yes.
people can choose how and when to consume it. They don't have to wait for 8 o'clock on Tuesday nights or so,
Yeah.
whatever the
Exactly.
case may
Yeah.
be. So I think it's awesome. I think it's probably in its teenage years. It's not fully adult yet. It's not infancy. It's not a tweener. It's kind of a teenage thing right now, I think, for podcasts. And I thought to myself, you know what? I could do that. So I started a podcast and a Facebook group to promote the books, my
Right.
own books. And before I know it, I'm having a blast. And it's been over 200 episodes now for the podcast, and it's doing really well. In the Facebook group, I've got cops literally from all over the world in my Facebook group. It's like 7,500 people strong. I didn't think anything would happen with that.
And the name of the podcast?
Cops and writers.
And so you kind of gave the uh, premise where it came originally just to promote. What has it developed into? Tell me what is if there is a typical episode.
You know, Today I interviewed a gentleman who's retired. He was an Ontario police officer. He was up in Canada, and he did a bunch of things with the syndicate, Hell's Angels, motorcycle gangs, etc. And he wrote a book about it.
Okay.
So I got the skinny from him because I don't know a lot about, Canadian law enforcement.
Yeah.
And it's not a whole lot different than American. Same criminals,
Hmm.
they have Mexican drug cartels in Canada. And I'm like, really? The mafia was huge in Canada. And some of the stuff I didn't know, and just some of the joint task forces that they did with the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So I'm getting to know these people and I'm interviewing them, and it's a platform for them to promote, like, okay, he's promoting his book. But I get to meet people that I never thought I would before. You know,
Mhm.
Today I was on the phone with my good friend Steve Murphy. Did you see the Netflix series Narcos?
Yes.
Yeah, that's him. It was him and his partner, Javier
Wow.
Pena. And now I'm on speed dial with the guy and we're just shooting the breeze. We just hit it off. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy is a huge deal. And he's just as normal and nice as anybody that you would ever meet. And he's like, you should have, this guy on your show. And then I'm like, no, you should have this girl on your show, and we go back and forth and we help each other out because he has a podcast as well. And there's this network that never would have happened if I didn't have the podcast. It's not just the podcast, it's the people that you meet doing this. And I'm sure you've run across this as well, where, I've done some TV documentaries, and it's because producers have reached out to me saying, hey, you know what? I like your voice. You can tell a story and you have the chops, the police chops behind you. So sure
Yeah.
enough, I'm behind a camera now.
How fun.
Yes.
No, that has not happened to me yet. But fingers. So you've written a little nonfiction, right? And then you
Hmm.
did a how-to book basically for, hey, if you want to, and I always think of Isaac Asimov said that he never mind, it never bothered him if writers used his three robotics law because it it made sure that it was a good story. If you followed those, it would be a good story. It wouldn't be a dumb robot, losing control and stuff. So, did you I see you're now writing fiction.
Hmm.
Where did that road to Damascus moment go? Hey, maybe I want to do this.
Well, it's funny because I was interviewing
Yeah.
somebody who Mike Landerly is LMBPN. It's about a mid-size hybrid publishing company.
Okay.
And I interviewed him, and after I got done recording, we're just shooting the breeze afterwards. He says, I'm really looking for somebody to write police, like crime fiction. Are you interested? I'm like, sure, why not? So I wrote 4 books in 6, 7 months, somewhere in that ballpark.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you're under the gun. I had very strict deadlines. What was neat about it was he has his company. It's like a machine. You know, I didn't have to worry about book covers. I had input. They have their own editors, proofreaders, ARC and beta teams, you name it, and it goes boom, boom. It's a well-oiled machine. And that's one of the reasons you can pump out something that quickly. And the people that he has are just crackerjack. They're really good. So we did a series called Brew City Blues, kind of like Hill Street Blues, but modern times in Milwaukee.
Okay. And
And go ahead.
and yeah, I was going to ask why did you decide in Milwaukee and what about the premise? It sounds similar to, The Rookie, the Nathan
Yeah.
Fillion show, right? That yeah. So how did you come up with the idea and what is there do you enjoy plot, characters? Talk to me a little bit about your process on that.
As far as the process goes, you write what you know. I think you're most successful when you do that. I could probably write a fairly decent series set in Los Angeles, say. But I've been to LA once. I've been to San Diego a bunch of times. But I still don't feel comfortable as far as like the culture, because every police department has its own little quirks and lingo, and we're all very, very similar across the world, really. But there is some stuff that is geographically specific. And I didn't want to do all the research. It's kind of like laziness too on my side. I'm like, okay, I know this. So I wrote what I knew, and it did pretty good. I mean, we sold quite a few books. And then I wanted to go somewhere else. And I pitched it to my boss, and he said, no, it's way too dark. He said, if you want to do it yourself, do it yourself. And I'm like, all right. So hopefully by Christmas week, maybe the week after, I'm going to have a new series starting, and it's called The Good Collar. It's very similar to Dexter. I don't know if you're a Dexter fan.
I am familiar with the series. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of a serologist, Dexter was a serologist for the Miami PD. He was a blood spatter analyst.
Right.
He was a civilian. I'm going to have the police chaplain being the serial killer.
Wow.
He's going to right all the wrongs. And the way it works, it's kind of like an Obi-Wan Luke thing where you have the apprentice.
Yeah.
It's the book starts out very rough. The main character is going out to eat with his pregnant wife. She's
Mm.
killed. He's almost dead. And
Wow.
he's a gang sergeant in Milwaukee. Again, we're back in Milwaukee. And he's almost dead. He goes down a very dark road. His friends are trying to pull him out. He's turning into an alcoholic, et cetera, et cetera. And the police chaplain that he doesn't know yet is the serial killer is trying to lift him up. And he's like, you know what? You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your pension. You're going to lose your job. So the backstory of my hero here is he was in seminary when he was in high school. He had to quit the seminary because his father died of cancer, and he liked girls. This whole chastity thing was not his
Yeah.
thing.
Not
So,
gonna work out. Okay.
yeah, not a good thing for him.
Yeah.
So, he gets out and he's got the religious background. And this police chaplain is like, we're going to save your pension. You're going to become the next chaplain because he, the older guy, the serial killer, he's got lung cancer and his days are numbered.
Mm.
So he wants to pass the torch to him. He says, you're going to have this opportunity, but you're going to have to continue my work. You're going to have to hunt down these people that slip through the cracks of the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is if you're the police chaplain, you go anywhere you want.
Yeah.
Everybody trusts you. You go in and out of crime scenes. You got an office at the headquarters. You have complete access to the computers. It's the perfect scenario for this.
Wow.
So that's what I'm writing, and I've got great side characters. This guy's the main character's sister is a nun. She's married to God. Okay,
Yeah.
step back.
Why do you think you want to go to the darkness?
It's something I think every cop has that in them. Obviously,
Okay.
we don't act out on that, but you see all the injustices every day. You're beaten over the head with it. There's a lot of attention on police reform, prison reform, etc. In all of these conversations and TV shows, not once have I ever seen the victim of a crime give their 2 cents worth.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, once you've stared into their eyes and seen how this affected them, you wouldn't be as warm and comfy to the criminal. Let's just say that.
Okay.
There's a part of you that's like, you know what? This poor girl is ruined for life. She will
Yeah.
have no life now. He stole that from her.
Yeah.
Going all the way up to like homicides,
Yeah.
dealing with families, etc. Just the carnage and damage that is done is unbelievable.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, I remember reading an article that the showrunner of The Closer was on, the TNT show.
Hmm.
And he said that he found homicide detectives are so focused on getting justice for the victim's family.
Right.
That's why the Brenda character, the Kara Sidgwick, would do anything she could to catch the killer, regardless of her personal relationships, not breaking the law, but just she would definitely not worry about social niceties because that's what she's driving. So are you saying similar to something you've seen that?
You know, as far as homicide detectives go, most of them are some of the most dedicated individuals you'll ever find, and their hearts are in the right places. And, I think there was a show, it's like the first 24 or first 48 or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's true. if you have a hot trail, you
Yeah.
don't stop. That which means, I mean,
Hmm.
I have as a cop, I remember one of the first homicides that I was working is just as a street cop. I'm working midnight to 8, and I didn't get done till 11 o'clock the next night. Then I went to work again. I just took like a half-hour cat nap in my car,
Hmm.
and that's the way it is. You keep going until the trail goes cold.
Yeah.
Now, that could mean it's like, little Johnny's birthday is tomorrow. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I promised my girlfriend we're going to go out to eat to celebrate our anniversary. Yeah, that's not going to happen. You
Wow.
know, so that does take a toll on your personal life.
Yeah.
But some of the mistakes that you see are, errors, and it's Hollywood. You got to
Yeah.
take it with
Sure.
a grain of
Absolutely.
salt.
Yeah.
There's one detective that's on this, he only has this one case. Most homicide detectives are juggling more than one case.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and there's more than one. And lo and behold, they have a boss or bosses, plural.
Yeah.
He's okay, then you're going to go to prison, but that's just the way it works. We have to play by the rules. We have to do things the right way. You have to play by the
Yeah.
Constitution. Every department has its rules and regs,
Yeah.
etc. So that's what TV and movies really doesn't show.
Yeah. What is there something you haven't done you want to, Patrick? Creatively?
Creatively, I think about every now and then, it's like, I wonder how hard it would be to learn how to play guitar because
Okay.
I can still read music. I picked up the saxophone after forever, and I'm like, okay, I don't have an amateur anymore. I don't have the chops, literally. That comes with time and practice.
Yeah.
So, getting back into music or maybe even writing music, because I tell you what, two of my favorite musicians and songwriters would be Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty,
Okay.
because they can tell a story in 3 minutes that some people can't in hours.
Yeah.
It's a gift, it's a talent. Oh,
I
we're a
can
little
still
bit
hear
done.
you. You're good.
I know what I was gonna say is you can't go overboard on words. You can't waste anything. And some of these songs, it just touches your soul.
Yeah.
Both those guys, and it's like, wow, it is amazing.
Hmm.
So if I could do that, that'd be pretty cool.
Creatively, writing. Do you want to do, I know the books have dark humor, and I saw that on the website when I was reading that
Mhm.
there is a little bit of, hey, this is not for the faint of heart. Have
Correct.
you thought about doing a different genre?
I mean, I am a science fiction nerd. My wife makes fun of me. I still watch Star Trek: The Next Generation. I have that in me from, way back when. And, you know, I just don't think I have the chops for it. I think
Okay.
my hat is off to people who can, because I think they're very analytical. Their minds work a certain way
Yeah.
for good science fiction. I think they're very like science oriented, and obviously you have to have the creativity as well, but yeah, that ain't easy. That's not easy.
All right. So talk about what are some of your favorite Springsteen albums? Get back to a little bit of Bruce here.
Well, the first album that my brother came home with was The River,
Yeah.
and it's still one of my very, very, very favorites. It was a double album, and it had serious stuff, it had fun stuff. I thought it had it all. I was just like, wow. It's definitely one of those desert island albums.
Yeah.
If I'm stranded on a desert island, if I had like 5 albums I could bring with me, The River would definitely be there, with me.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Because there was so much in there. There's such a variety. I just, it's one of my favorites. Then, Darkness, I did like that a lot. You know,
Mhm.
Born to Run. I mean, it's Born to Run.
Sure.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
wow.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
that's that's pretty damn impressive. But I didn't like a lot of the newer stuff.
Okay.
I did like Tunnel of Love, and what was it? Tunnel of Love and Human Touch came out at the same time. What was
No,
it?
A Ton of Love was right after Born in the USA,
Oh, okay.
breakup album.
Because I saw Bruce in concert for Tunnel of Love, and he didn't travel with the entire E Street Band for that. and he was talking about getting divorced, and he was like bummed out. I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow, he was
Yeah.
really opening up, and I'm just like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah. Um, so what's next for you? You've got this new series and you're gonna explore even darker, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the series is gonna go even darker. The first book is setting everything up. This guy is gonna be he's gonna be righting the wrongs, but also he's going after the guys that killed his wife
Yeah.
as well. So that's like the side story. And of
Okay.
course, there's gonna be near misses. His sister might find out, just stuff like that. You got to keep it interesting.
Very nice.
Does Mary get in the car? Of course she does.
That is where we're going to end up next. I want to make sure else. Yeah, one of the things that if you are a fan of Pat's work and or his podcast, his books, and you're listening to this, thank you. He's done great. It's been a fun guest. But I end every podcast with the Mary question. He's already given us a little bit of an answer, but I'll expand a little bit. Jay Armstrong was an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. And when he would teach his seniors, there was an honor English. He would give them the lyrics to Thunder Road, and he would ask them, read the lyrics as a poem, and then discuss, does they think that Mary gets the car at the end of Thunder Road? So you've already said yes. Can you tell me why you think she does?
Well, just listening to the song itself, and I guess there's a part of me that wants her to get in there. It's a time for losers, but they're
Yeah,
pulling out of there to win. Damn it, it's like
yeah,
okay, it's a happy ending. You know,
yeah.
they're gonna jet away. First he sees her on the porch, her dress is swaying, and just it's so well written. And I'm like, okay, yeah, she's definitely getting in that car, and they're screaming out of there. And that's the music that from Bruce that I love, where he's talking about getting his heart broken, or cars, and just, oh man, it was just that was rock and roll, baby. I absolutely loved it.
That's awesome. If someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
Copsandwriters.com is my website.
And where's the best books available? Books are right.
I,
That's
I'm Amazon exclusive right now.
good. And remind me what the new series is going to be called?
The Good Collar.
The Good Collar.
Thank you.
Yeah. Patrick, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking time and visiting with me and sharing. Any final thoughts?
I guess my final thoughts is, again, just enjoy the music that was produced by some of these amazing, amazing musicians. And don't be afraid to go back into their back catalogs to really see where all this came from, and just appreciate it. And if you have a chance to go see somebody live in a smaller venue, if you can, just I love the rawness. I mean, I was telling you before, I was a huge punk rock fan as well. I saw X. I don't know if you know, they sang Breathless. And
Okay.
Exene Cervenka was the lead singer, and Billy Zoom was the guitar player. I mean, this is like hardcore punk. This is from the
Yeah.
80s. And some guy rushed the stage when she was on there, and she kicked this guy so hard in the face. You could see teeth flying like chiclets in the air. And I'm just like, this chick is badass. I'm like, holy cow. It's like she's almost like Chrissy Hine badass from the Pretenders. I was just like, yeah, this is pretty damn cool.
All right, listeners, go to the website, check it out, check out the series. Let them know you heard about it on Set Lusting Bruce. Let's do this again sometimes, Patrick. I had a
Absolutely.
blast visiting with you.
Dude, I could talk music all night long.
That sounds great. We actually didn't get much into Tom, and that would be a whole nother episode I'd
Oh,
love to
I'd love
talk
that.
about. All right, that
I
sounds
would.
great.
All
All
right.
right, listeners, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the support, and be sure and be safe, be kind. Goodbye.